كلية الفقه الحنفي تقدم
الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده أما بعد سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا. After praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Most High, we send salutations upon our beloved Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us, to grant us the best of this world and the hereafter, and to grant us beneficial knowledge. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. So today we will be continuing with the last bits of the funeral prayer. Is it allowed to perform the funeral prayer on a group of individuals? How would you do that? Then we will discuss regarding how to carry the bier. If you are to carry the bier where the corpse is placed on, the deceased is placed on, then how do you carry this in the recommended method that the book mentions? We'll talk about that inshallah. Then when we'll move on to the rulings regarding the actual grave. So digging the grave, how will it be dug? Then certain du'as to be recited when lowering the body into the grave. Then how to place the body in the grave. And we'll discuss regarding how to bury a woman as well. Then the ruling of actually after the grave is filled in, then how to shape it, and are you allowed to then place any structures, or are you allowed to solidify it or anything like that? We'll talk about all of these rulings. Then are you allowed to dig a big grave to bury multiple people, though separately, but we'll talk about that as well. What should a person recite when near the grave or visiting a graveyard, in fact? So we'll talk about that too, inshallah. And lastly, we will then move on to the ruling of the martyrs, the shuhada, and we'll discuss regarding who a martyr is and certain rulings regarding them. May be performed over an entire group of deceased, yet a separate prayer for each individual body is more preferable. So if you have so many deceased, as there were in times of war, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Uhud, for example, there's reports that there would be 10 people, 10 bodies would be brought, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would perform Salatul Janaza on all of them in one go. Then the next 10 would be brought like this. So you can have the entire group of deceased in front, and then you can perform one single janaza prayer on all of them. Like it takes place in the haram, you have sometimes a few bodies, and they pray one salatul janaza for all of them in one go. So it can be done on an entire group of the deceased. And when doing this, the men will be placed first, closest to the imam, and then if there's children, then children, and then behind them, closer to the qibla side, you can say the women will be placed. Just like the rows in if they were praying, if they were alive and praying, the rows behind the imam are made. So closest to the imam is the men, then you have children, then you have the women behind. Like that, the rows would be made of men bodies first, then behind them children bodies, and behind them further away from the imam would be the women bodies. So this is how you place them if you're praying on a group of individuals. Yet a separate prayer, like I said, for each one of them is better. When carrying the bier, meaning where the body is of the deceased is placed, the farsh we call the biya. It is recommended to place to first place the front right side, then the back right side on the right shoulder. So it means if I'm carrying the biya to the graveyard after having prayed where we prayed. So when we carry it to the grave site, what I should do is I will start from the deceased. So if the deceased is laying there and this is the head of the deceased, so I will start from the right side of the deceased. So the right side, if he's laying that way, would be this would be his right side. So I will place my right shoulder in that corner. That's where I will place my right shoulder, and I will carry a few steps. The biya, I will carry it. Then I move backwards. Okay, I move back, and I come to my right shoulder now is at where the feet of the deceased would be, and I'm carrying the biya on that side. Followed by the front left side, then the back left side on the left shoulder. So then I come to the front, right shoulder, and my right shoulder is on the front of the deceased's right shoulder in essence. And then I come to the back where the feet of the deceased is on the right foot. I'm carrying my right shoulder. Then I go to the front left side. So then I will carry on my left shoulder where the deceased's left shoulder would be in essence when he's laying there. And then I move backwards. So you're going like a zigzag shape like this. You're coming from top to bottom, and you go to the top again, and you come to the bottom. And this is how you carry the deceased. And you have turns like that, and people carry the deceased. Obviously, this is recommended if a person is able to do this. If people don't know how to do this, because then you end up, if you are on one side, because everyone would have to shift, you see. If you're moving from the front to the back, somebody's going to have to take your place at the front. So if you move to the back, from the front without warning, then obviously that end's going to drop. So people need to know what's happening and how the movement is going to take place. So this is why this might be a bit difficult practically. So if it is, then because people don't know how to do it, then it's going to be something, just leave it on where you are and just carry on walking, because this is recommended to do, not necessary to do. So that is this. Then it mentions it is recommended to move fast when carrying the body. So you walk fast. You don't walk slowly like a procession. People do, like when the honorable person of a country dies and they take the body, they march very slowly like a procession. You don't do that. You walk fast. You walk with direction. You walk like you know where you're going, but you don't run or anything. You don't start like shaking the body. So not so fast as to cause it to wobble, like the body inside is wobbling. That's not what you want to do. It is more preferable to walk behind the procession. So if you are walking and following the procession to take the body to the grave, then in front of it. So you walk it back, not in front. It is disliked to raise one's voice with dhikr, with any sort of dhikr or the like. So you don't start saying dhikr loud or anything like that, as well as to sit down before the body is lowered into the grave. So you do not sit down until the body is lowered down into the grave. So this is something mentioned here. So this is prohibitively disliked, makruh tahrimi, if you sit down before the body is lowered into the grave. Whereas there is a difference of opinion regarding the dhikr, like reciting Quran, whether it's prohibitively disliked or mildly disliked. Both opinions have been mentioned, so no problem. It's obviously there's a dislike there. Moving on, it says the grave is dug the length of at least half a body's length into the ground. So when you're going digging, how deep do you have to go? Do you have to go 6 feet under, in essence, which is commonly known by people? So you don't have to go 6 feet down, okay? But it says at least half the body's length. So if we say if a person's between 5 and 6 feet, so around about 2.5 to 3 feet down at least. But doing that, I would say, if you go 3 feet down, then many times it's known that the animals can actually dig that up. So they do go a little bit lower than that, maybe 4 or 5 feet down at least. Many times they go obviously deeper, they go 6 feet or even lower than that sometimes in some graveyards. So this is digging what depth you have to dig. Then it says it is dug in an L shape, which is called a lahad. So what it means, if I was to draw, if you're looking at the grave cross section, okay, so it would be shaped as an L, like a boot, okay. So the grave would be down, okay, then there would be this incision into the side of the grave wall. So there'd be an incision like a triangle, and then it'll come straight and up, back up again. So if you can draw that out, you will see what I mean. This is called like an L shape grave. So what this L shape is, with this niche when you dig, so it's with the niche facing the Qibla. So if the Qibla was this side, that's where you dig. If the Qibla was this side, this is where you would dig the niche. So the idea is that the body, when it's placed, it's going to be placed into this niche, so that the soil, when it's thrown from on top, it doesn't hit the body. It's inside this niche, so the soil will not hit the body. That's the idea here. So rather than straight down, so rather than digging a shaq is called, or shiq, so rather than digging a grave which is just a normal grave like this, you would say, but what they do is they dig the grave like this, and then in the center of the bottom, the base, the floor of the grave, what they do, they dig a smaller like incision grave. So the body will be placed there, and then you can place some planks or something on top of it. Okay, so that's what they generally do. So it says that except in soft ground. So because in soft ground, you can't dig a niche into the wall, because every time you dig, the wall is going to cave down. It's going to keep coming down. So you're going to dig, it's going to keep coming down. So it needs to be a bit more solid, the wall, for you to be able to dig a niche into the wall and for it to then stay. So that's why they then dig this shaq like this, so that you can say like a body shape, you can say, that is dug there. Then the body is placed into that little incision, this in carved out part of the middle of the grave. So that's what happens. Then it says the one lowering the body into the grave within the niche says, in the name of Allah and on the way of the Messenger of Allah, Bismillahi ala millati Rasulillah. So you lower the grave, you lower the body into the grave whilst saying this. The body is directed towards the Qibla while on its right side, according to the Sunnah. So what you do is you place the body down into the grave. If the Qibla was this way, then you place the body this down in a way whereby the body is then tilted to the right side, and you use like clogs of soil to prop the body up. You tilt the body this way on the right side, and you make the body face the Qibla. The right side, you make the face the Qibla, and you make the whole body face that way. That's the Sunnah to do. And the knots of the shroud are untied. So remember the knots that we tied, the 3 knots, there were 3 strings, one at the top, one at the bottom, and one in the middle. You now untie it. You can leave that string there, you don't need to take the string out, just untie it and leave it. And then he says, and unbaked bricks are laid against it. So if we were placing the body into that niche, you would then make like a wall with unbaked bricks. Okay, so then the body is then, it says, against the niche, whereby sealing it off within the grave. So you like kind of seal that niche off, so you're left with the grave now at the end. So that's how you do this. Obviously, if you are digging the shaq, then they generally place planks. Even the niche nowadays, the lahad way, they generally place planks across. They don't use unbaked bricks, because unbaked bricks is not really in custom used anymore. So they put the planks across, and then they place the body underneath it, they place the planks, and then they put the soil on top. So this is what happens. Moving on, the grave of a woman, not that of a man, is covered before her body is placed in it. So what we do is, if whilst you are taking the body of the woman and you're placing it into the grave, obviously the people who are taking the body of the grave have to be the mahram of that, the unmarriageable kin of that woman. So you call the unmarriageable kin the children, or the husband, or the father, whoever it is, the brothers of this woman, and they will now take the body and they will lower it into the grave. Now, whilst they're lowering into the grave, people should hold out a big cloth over the grave, so then other people cannot see what's happening, so there's more concealment there. So this is what it's talking about, that it's better to cover the grave whilst placing the body into the grave. You hold out a big sheet over the grave from up on top. Then it says, once this is all done, dirt is poured into the grave, meaning you put soil into that grave now, and then round it. When you put the soil on top, you round it as its top. So the top part on its top, then round it on its top with an elevation of a handspan or a bit more, to resemble the hump of a camel. So the grave, where it would be ground level, the grave will be at least a handspan, one handspan, or a bit more than that, humped. Okay, that's how you bury that's how much soil you put on top. The reason why the hump is because generally once the body starts to decay and go, the hump will then go down and it will become flattened. That's the idea. Then it says, it is prohibited to build a structure over the grave for the sake of decoration. So building a structure over the grave is not allowed, and making the grave solidified, this is again not allowed. The only time you can put something onto the grave is like a stone, or like a gravestone or something, without being too lavish or anything, without having any Quranic ayat or anything. Don't have any Quranic wordings or anything, because it's unnecessary, and it's there out in the open. So it's not its sanctity is not properly, it's not taken care of. So on the gravestone, name is there perhaps just for recognition. This is a need, so that's fine. That much is okay. That's why it says, if there is a legitimate reason, a necessity, it is permissible to bury multiple bodies in one grave. In that case, sand and dirt is used to make a barrier between each body. So if you've got a mass grave dugout, big grave dugout, and you need it to, because there's so many burials that are happening right now, there's so many bodies that we need to bury in one go. You can't keep digging, because digging takes long. You can't keep digging so many different holes. So then you want to bury more than one person in one dugout, hole. Then what you do is you put the body. You can't put bodies on top of bodies. What you do is you put one body, and then you put another body which is apart. Then when you put the soil and things, you use the soil in between them to separate them. So it's like, in essence, makeshift two separate graves. So that's how you do it. And if you dig a bigger hole, then you can put more people in there. So you make the sand or the dirt or the mud, whatever it is, you make that separate them. Some people use rocks to separate them, or wood to separate them, whatever you use, but you try to separate them so they have their own grave. That's the idea. It is not permissible to transfer the corpse after its burial once the grave has been filled with dirt. So once the grave has been filled, you do not dig it back up to transfer it. This is not permissible. Unless the land turns out to have been confiscated. If the land turns out to be land which was maghsoob, which was not land that it belonged to them, it didn't belong to the person, and we buried this, the person taking permission from the wrong person, then obviously the original owner comes say, sorry, I need my land back. Then you can take the body out and bury it somewhere else. So it is recommended to visit graves and to recite Surah Yasin, even if sitting next to them, due to that which has been narrated, namely, this hadith has been narrated, whoever visits graves and recites Surah Yasin, then on then on that day Allah will lighten the punishment for them, meaning the inhabitants of the grave will lighten punishment on them, and he, meaning the reciter, will have as many good deeds as there are deceased in that graveyard. So this is a tremendous reward. So meaning reciting Surah Yasin, you can say, is something definitely something which a person should do. It is disliked to sit at graves for other than reciting Quran or making dhikr. You don't sit on graves for any other reason, or step on them. So you shouldn't be stepping on graves anyway, or to pluck out moist grass. So any moist grass that's there, don't pluck it out, leave it, because we know that everything, there's the tasbih of Allah. So whilst it's moist, it will carry on doing tasbih of Allah from the graveyard. You should not be removing these things. So these are the rulings over here. Just one thing that's mentioned in the footnotes that I'll highlight here. It says that, this concept of not transferring the corpse, and how much, sorry, the mas'ala of where is it gone? Sorry. Yeah, transferring the body before burial. So a lot of people, they want to transfer the body to another country because somebody maybe said that bury me in this country or something like that. So there is the permissibility of of transporting the body to another country. Not to another country, should I say, to a different place. The jurists have generally mentioned around about 2.3 miles away, as you can go 2.3 miles away. You shouldn't be going more than that without a valid reason. If there is a valid reason whereby there is no burial site here, there's nowhere that we can bury, and we have to go further away, the nearest graveyard is somewhere else, a bit more further away, then it's fine, you go to the nearest graveyard. But there is no virtue for being buried back home, or to be buried next to your, next to a beloved, next to a spouse, or next to a father, or next to a mother, or something like this. They shouldn't be done. These kind of wishes should not be made, and people shouldn't be transferring bodies to other countries, because then many a times there's regulations whereby they take out they take out some of the intestines and all of that stuff. Some of them these things are removed from the body because of obviously the regulations. So these things need to be taken care of properly. Likewise, if a post-mortem needs to take place, then we don't recommend post-mortem. Post-mortem is only if it's needed. Then we say that, okay, if a post-mortem is needed, regulation, then we allow it because of regulation. Otherwise, we would not allow post-mortem at all. And it's always best to opt for a ultrasound type, rather than the manual cutting and doing post-mortem in that way. So the scanning post-mortem, opt for that one if that is available, and that is the better option, so that the body doesn't get cut up. And so these are certain rulings here that we need to take care of. Just checking to see if we've missed anything else. And one more ruling actually, that can you bury the deceased with the coffin? So if there is a reason to place the coffin into the grave with the like for example, certain areas, the mud, the soil is such that you have to place the coffin in, otherwise the body will get crushed. The soil is very, very dense, it's very heavy, it's almost like clay. So then in those areas we've said that it's allowed to bury the body with the coffin, because otherwise if you don't do that, even if you put planks there, the body will get crushed. So we don't want that to happen too quickly. So you place a coffin in the actual the grave. Otherwise, using a coffin without this kind of reason would be disliked, okay, because obviously it will prevent the body from decaying, as it should do in time. It will take time for the coffin to first decay, and then eventually the body will decay. So there's no reason for it as well. Obviously coffins cost a lot, so it's adding costs for no reason as well. So this is something that we need to take care of. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So now we move on to page number 125, where it mentions regarding martyrs, meaning the shuhada. So according to our fiqh, a martyr is one who is killed by enemy combatants, so whilst in war in essence. Rebels, meaning again they're fighting rebels, and they're killed, this person is killed by the rebels. Then furthering the scope, we also say highway brigands, so meaning highway robbers, or just general robbers at his house at night. So all these people who die because of these reasons or through these means are all going to be coming under the ruling of a martyr according to the legal sense. Even if, moving on in the book, even if killed by a heavy object, what it means is that if these people that we stated above, they killed this person, this innocent person, they killed them using something heavy like a rock or something like that. They threw a rock on them, all right, or they threw something else heavy onto them. And normally, you wouldn't really die with that, but obviously this person died because of their head crushing or their organs being crushed and they're internally bleeding or something like that. So a heavy object being thrown at them, or one who is killed unjustly by a Muslim, even by a Muslim with a sharp object. So the above ones didn't necessarily have to be Muslims, enemy combatants, rebels, didn't have to necessarily be Muslims. But now if somebody is unjustly killed by a Muslim, so two people were having a debate, they turned very violent, and somebody took out a sword, a knife or something and stabbed them. When he says with a sharp object, obviously it means something which is generally killed with. So if you took out a gun and they shot them, this is also considered sharp because the bullet would pierce somebody. The idea is that these are things generally killed with. These are instruments, these are weapons that are generally used to kill somebody. But the heavy object is something which is not generally like a big table or something, it's not generally something which you would kill with. So the point is above, even if a person was killed with a heavy object, obviously if a person was killed by the enemy and everything else with a sharp object, which is something normally you would be killed by, then that's definitely going to be counted anyway as a martyr. But there's an extension there that even a heavy object, which would normally not kill, but because these people, they transgressed against the Muslim and killed them, this is why this person will also be counted as a martyr. But when it comes to a Muslim being the aggressor, it has to be, in essence, an intentful kill. It has to be a kill with an object, with a weapon that you normally would kill with. So if a Muslim killed with a heavy object another Muslim, unjustly even, they would not be a martyr in the sense of the legal way. Though they may be a martyr in the sense of the akhirah, in the sense of the hereafter, where Allah will reward them perhaps. But in worldly context, where we are attaching fiqh ruling, legal ruling, then according to the legal sense, they will not be counted as a martyr. They will be a normal person who's passed away, and they will be given the normal burial, the rights of burial and everything else. So hopefully that's made this clear. Now, though there are martyrs, like martyr, we say that if a person passes away in an accident, a person who passes away in an illness, these are martyrs. But they're martyrs in the sense of the akhirah, in the hereafter, not in the legal sense. So in the legal sense, only these people that we have stated here are the legal martyrs, which this ruling will then count for. So we move on in the book, we understand the ruling. So it says the martyr is buried with his blood meaning without washing them, in his clothes, in the same clothes that they were martyred in, and is prayed over without being washed. So they are prayed over, they're given the janazah prayer, but no ghusl, no kafan, no shroud. Their clothing they will be buried in. Obviously, if they don't have any clothing, then we'll put clothing on them. If the enemy have taken their clothing off or something like this, then we'll shroud them. But otherwise, we will not take their clothing off. His weapons, though, armor, winter coat. Winter coat is like, in essence, any stuffing that they've got. And it says padded garments as well are removed. So any extra stuffing that they've stuffed themselves with or anything, will take all the extra things off. If, however, he was killed while in a state of major ritual impurity or as a child, then his body is washed. So we wash them if they were in this state. The same is true for one whose death becomes prolonged after the battle ends. So in the battle they were wounded, but then they stayed alive. And later on the wound became infected and they died subsequently, considerably later. What it means by prolonged is going to explain accurately anyway. So if the person did not die as the direct result, you can say more or less immediately in the battle, they were in essence carried away, then the person will not be counted as a martyr. So that's what he's saying. After the battle ends, the death prolonged, whereby, whether by eating, so they were eating in between, they drinking, not a few sips, but like actually properly enjoying, a drink. They were sleeping, they went to sleep, they not just that they fell unconscious, they actually, properly went to sleep. Being given medication, not just, trying to cure them, but like actually they were going through a treatment. Having a prayer time elapse whilst being conscious. So a whole time of prayer went on them, and they were conscious during that time, meaning they actually were able to pray the next prayer. Or being transferred from the battlefield while alive. So they were picked up, or they were carried from the battlefield, they were taken alive out of the battlefield into the camp, into a hospital or something like this. So then all of these people who passed away later on, they're not going to be counted as the legal martyr. The only time, if they're carried away from the battlefield very injured, and then they more or less died immediately, but the reason they were carried away from the battlefield was unless out of fear of being trampled upon by animals or anything else, or by the enemy, further being injured or something by the enemy. So then they were carried away for this purpose, then more or less they died straight away. Then if we left them there, they would have died straight away anyway, so they will still be counted as a martyr. The idea here simply is trying to explain that if the death was prolonged, what it means is that if there was after the wounding, if there was a significant gap in between, okay, what it means by the significant gap in between is that they experienced some comfort of life. That's why it said eating, drinking, sleeping, yeah. Or they didn't experience some comfort of life, but they became legally obliged for a ritual prayer, meaning a prayer came onto them, and they now became legally obliged to pray that prayer, and that time passed upon them, even if they didn't get a chance to pray because they were too injured or something, right? Then this is, their death is now prolonged. So now there's a gap between their injury and their death. So we can't connect their death to directly the injury, although it's going to be indirectly connected. So that's why they will not be counted as a martyr in the legal sense. So then they will be washed, they will be given a ghusl, they will be given kafan, they will be wrapped, and everything else as well. So that is this ruling here. And lastly, it mentions anyone killed by penal punishment, meaning a had, or retaliatory punishments, meaning qisas, meaning if they were killed life for life, retaliation, is washed after death, meaning they are not counted as a martyr. That is the ruling of martyrs. next we go on to the chapter of fasting, the Sawm. So we'll start this off now. So the legal definition of fasting is to withhold from eating, drinking and sexual intercourse during daylight hours. So that's obviously accurately from the Subh Sadiq, we call from true dawn, from the beginning of Fajr time. So from this beginning of Fajr time, true dawn, all the way up to the Maghrib time until sunset. So this is what we call the day, okay? Not from sunrise, but from before that, from the true dawn, first light. So that's that, with an intention of fasting performed by one capable and required to do so. Obviously, the intention has to be done by somebody who is mukallaf, somebody who is capable of fasting and required to fast. There is one mas'ala here, one ruling here that we need to explain. So when we say that the person from true dawn, right from the point of where true dawn starts, the person has to stop eating, right? And to the extent, this is so strict to the extent that if a person was in the middle of their food, they were eating, so it means that if before that Subh Sadiq, they can eat as much as they want. After Maghrib, all the way up to all that night, up till true dawn, the Fajr Sadiq, the Subh Sadiq, they can eat up till that true dawn. But once the true dawn happens, the very moment true dawn happens, you have to stop eating, even if you're in the middle of your meal. Now, to the extent that if somebody has a morsel or they're drinking something and they had something in their mouth and the Subh Sadiq happens, they will have to take that out. They cannot swallow that. Otherwise, this will invalidate their fast. Now, there is a hadith that some people commonly use, which mentions that if a person, if one of you hears the call, meaning hears the adhan, whilst he has a vessel in his hand, meaning you have something that you're drinking from in your hand, then let him not place it down until having fulfilled his need from it. So you drink as much as you want, and then you fulfill your need from it, and then you place it down. So that's what the apparentness of that hadith says. But you can clearly see, firstly, logically, this doesn't make sense to take it on apparent meaning, because that means then I could carry on holding that vessel in my hand as long as I want. I could hold it in my hand for hours and hours. I could carry on sipping from it. I could get a big jug and carry on sipping from it, never put it down, keep sipping from it. And for hours afterwards, I could carry on sipping from it. Now, anyone can understand that this hadith then does not mean on the literal sense. So what does it mean? It's saying, first it's saying that if you hear the call to adhan, the call to prayer, because there were two adhans in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is talking about the first adhan. Generally, the adhan that Bilal radiallahu anhu did, it was the call for, in essence, tahajjud as we call it, the call to prayer that was given before Subh Sadiq, way before Subh Sadiq, to alert people that were sleeping. Remember, they didn't have alarm clocks in their time. So how are people going to know it's time for suhoor, it's time to wake up and eat something or pray tahajjud or something? So as the hadith mentions, it was to alert the people. Some people had gone away and they had taken they were shepherds, they had taken their animals far away so they could come back home. All right, some people were standing in prayer and they were standing in devotion, and now they could hear the adhan, so then they can understand, I need to finish my prayer so I can eat something. You know, things like this, to alert the people so that they could wake up, for those who are still sleeping, to eat the suhoor, to enjoy in that suhoor. This is the first adhan that was called out. And then a second adhan, generally by Abdullah ibn Maktoum, was given later on, and that was at Subh Sadiq, and that's when they would stop eating. So that when we're saying this hadith, when it says if you hear the call, don't put your vessels down, is talking about the first adhan. That's the first interpretation we say. And there is another response given to this hadith as well, which is that this hadith is not sahih. It's not a sahih hadith. So people have objected to its authenticity. And nevertheless, this is what responses have been given. So a person should not be mistaken by this hadith and try to use the apparent of the wording of the hadith. The hadith needs to be understood in context. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So now to summarize what we've done today, we went through the ruling of performing Salatul Janazah. We started off with on a group of individuals, how to do that, how to place them with the men in the row, in the row first, next near the Imam, then the children, and then the women behind them in relation to the Imam. Then when carrying the bier, we talked about how it's recommended to carry, though I did mention that it may not be very possible to do this nowadays. But yeah, if people know what they're doing, then perhaps they can do this. Then understanding that taking the body to the graveyard it mentions in a fast motion, what this means, that you're meant to rush in a sense, but not hurry too much that it then creates too much movement of the body. If the deceased is moving about, being thrown around in the coffin or on the bier. So this shouldn't be happening. When digging the grave, we talked about the lahad and shiq, where the lahad is more preferred, but it may not be possible everywhere. So the shiq is also, the shaq is also something that a person can do, no problem with that. Then when lowering the body into the grave, the du'as to be recited, making the body face the qibla, and the ways that this can be done. And then covering the grave when lowering a woman into it, and forming a camel hump type on top of the grave with the soil, and not solidifying the structure or any structure, or cementing the grave or anything like that. But if a person wanted to put a gravestone for memory, in terms of so you can remember and identify which grave it is, then that's fine, absolutely okay. But a person shouldn't really put anything beyond the name. Maybe a date, perhaps, that could be okay, but certainly not verses of the Quran and things like this. A person should refrain from. And transferring the corpse from one place to another, we talked about that as well. Shouldn't be too far away. And then reciting Surah Al-Yasin, because it helps the inhabitants of the grave. So this is something that we should do. Then we talked about martyrs. We talked about how the who would not be martyrs, rebels, and highway robbers and people like this that are killed if they are doing what they're doing whilst they're conducting this particular action of theirs, this violation, then they will not be martyrs. But obviously a person who is actually killed by these people or killed by enemy combatants, then the person who is the innocent victim will be called a martyr. So we talked about this, the martyr, in terms of the worldly ruling will be on this person, as well as obviously the hereafter. The martyr has an extended ruling beyond that, in a sense that in the hereafter many more people are going to be considered martyrs, but not in the worldly sense. So the martyr, the ruling is that they're buried in their normal clothing, in their blood, in their wounds, in essence, but they are prayed Salatul Janazah upon. If obviously, this goes without saying, if the parts of their body are exposed, which should not be, then we should cover that. That's fine, but you leave them in their clothing. Doesn't mean you can't add extra parts if you need to. And then these are the main rulings, I guess, that we went through regarding the martyrs.